Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole. This is another one of our weekly chats on Congress. This has been one of those weeks where, while there were certainly important things that moved across the floor, the real activity is really out of sight of the cameras and off the floor of either the House or the Senate. Right now, there's a negotiation going on in the Senate that involves a request by the President of the United States for a national security supplemental. And this would be extra money spent on behalf of Israel, spent on behalf of Ukraine, spent to help our friends in the Western Pacific, particularly those in Taiwan, and additional money for the border. Now, there's a great deal of disagreement about this package. And Republicans have said, unless there's significant border security, that they would not support it. And frankly, in the Senate so far, they have not. Majority Leader Schumer brought it to the floor and didn't get a single Republican vote. And of course, in the Senate, you have to reach 60 to be able to move legislation. So with 49 Republicans, that's more than sufficient to block it. They were actually joined by 2 Democrats. It didn't even achieve the majority in the Senate. So clearly, if the president and the majority leader, Schumer, want additional money for Ukraine, money for Israel, money for the Western Pacific, they're going to have to make some significant concessions on border security. I'm pleased that one of the chief negotiators in that effort to get border security is our own senior senator from Oklahoma, Jim Langford. I think he's really held strong. I think he's really held the Democrats' feet to the fire on this, and I think he's telling them the truth. Look, that whatever they concoct over there will not pass the House unless we have border security. That's not because everybody over here is against Ukraine or Israel, quite the opposite. I think there's overwhelming support for Israel. The House has already passed a bill for Israel. They just offset the spending, and of course the Democrats never want to cut any spending and reprioritize what you've already spent towards something more important. But anyway, we've moved legislation, which we would hope they take up. It's not because there's huge because there's unanimous opposition to Ukraine. Actually, there's significant opposition to Ukraine amongst Republicans, but almost all Democrats support it. And so far, a majority of Republicans have consistently supported funding for Ukraine. And to be fair, it's not so much for Ukraine as it is to stop Vladimir Putin and the unprovoked Russian assault on an innocent neighbor. Now, that's really what's at stake here. So again, I think the Democrats are going to have to do something they don't like to do, sit down and compromise. Now, I hope they do. Look, we had literally this week a record number, over 12,000 illegal immigrants coming across our border in a single day. And it's not just the mass of humanity. When we have these record inflows, that also means record amounts of drugs coming into the country, record human trafficking. That's literally young men and women that are brought into our country, and predators take advantage of them here. It's an outrageous thing, and every border statistic we have has gotten worse since President Biden has been in office. We didn't have problems anywhere near this level when President Trump was there. That's just the truth, whether you like Donald Trump or not. Dismantling his border policies, the Remain in Mexico policy, stopping construction on the wall, ending some of the other policies, has just led to an unprecedented influx of people and a lot of problems. And you see this now in cities far, far away from the border. We have Democratic cities and Democratic mayors complaining about the problems created by illegal immigrants that they're supporting in their communities. So this is a problem that needs to be addressed. Thousands of Americans die of fentanyl overdoses every year. In many cases, they have no earthly idea they're getting fentanyl. So let's get serious about doing something on the border. If the president and the Democrats in the Senate are willing to do that, I have no doubt that they'll find people that are willing to work with them, not only on that issue, but to work with them on Israel, to work with them on funding the effort to stop Vladimir Putin and this Russian onslaught, and to work with him on strengthening our friends in the Western Pacific that face a lot of pressure from China. So again, there's a lot of movement about that right now. I think probably we had to have the vote so Democrats would understand how serious Republicans are. But again, Senator Langford and his fellow Republicans in the Senate are doing the right thing simply by saying this bill will never pass the House of Representatives unless we make some serious changes in it here. So I applaud their efforts in that regard. There's also important negotiations going on as to what the top line spending number would be. Now, to me, this is a pretty easy problem to solve. That is, we agreed in the debt ceiling deal that the top line we should spend to run the government, so to speak, would be $1.595 trillion over the next fiscal year. That's actually less than last year. It's a firm limit. Of course, Democrats in the Senate want a higher number, and they have all kinds of gimmicks to go around it. So our new speaker, Mike Johnson, has been locked in a negotiation with Senator Schumer and the White House over this. He's made his position perfectly clear. And again, we're willing to work with him. That was, after all, a compromise bill that set that limit, and it was supported by about 2/3 of the Republicans and the Democrats, and signed by the president. So that ought to be the limit. We should not be engaged in spending gimmicks to get around it. Finally, I want to note in this tape, the fact that both in the short term and a little bit longer term, I'll be losing two really close friends and colleagues that I've had the privilege of serving with in my congressional career. The first, of course, is Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And Speaker McCarthy has been a close friend and ally of mine since he arrived in Congress after the 2006 election. I think he is politically the most brilliant person that I've ever been associated with. I like to call him the Michael Jordan of politicians, because Michael Jordan was the greatest all-around player in the history of the NBA. And I'm sure when he retired, he was replaced by a very talented basketball player. But nobody remembers who that was, because Michael Jordan was that good. Kevin McCarthy is that good at politics. He is the best political strategist and thinker that the Republican Party has right now. He is certainly the most talented candidate recruiter, and you can see that in the very diverse crops of candidates, the dramatic increase in the number of veterans, women, minorities that the Republican Party's enjoyed under his leadership that are now serving in the House. And he was the most prolific fundraiser of all time in terms of getting the resources that are needed to run campaigns across 435 districts spanning the United States. Now, a lot of people disparage that, but the reality is it takes money to win a political race, and nobody was better at raising money for his team than Kevin McCarthy. Again, very, very valuable player. I have no doubt he's going to be brilliantly successful in his post-congressional career. He's probably going to make a lot of money. I hope he does. And I have no doubt he'll remain extraordinarily active in Republican politics and on the national stage. But I must say, as a colleague and as a friend, I'm going to miss him each and every day on the floor. He was a very effective speaker. He got a lot of good things done. He stopped Democratic overspending. He pushed important legislation across the floor, and everything from energy to border security to protection of unborn life. He strengthened the military during his brief tenure. He made sure that we passed budgets that took care of our obligations to our veterans, and he also was very focused on getting the resources and the policy changes that we need to secure our southern border. So it was a brief speakership, but I think a productive one, and it's very sad that he was forced out. He was not forced out because of anything he did wrong. There were no personal scandals, there were no improprieties. We just had a few malcontents that combined with every single Democrat to deny us the services of, I think, again, one of the most effective political operatives and most effective speakers that I've seen. So I regret that very much. I also regret the announcement of my good friend Patrick McHenry from Congress. He'll finish out this term. Most of you probably don't know who Patrick is. He's the chairman of the Financial Services Committee. He arrived here in 2004. Was kind of a firebrand when he first got here, and by the time he left was regarded as a senior statesman of enormous prestige and bipartisanship. If you know him at all, you probably would recognize him as that guy in the speaker's chair with the little bow tie, because he operated for 22 days as the Speaker Pro Tem of the United States House of Representatives. That period when we didn't have a speaker, Kevin McCarthy had chosen a list of 5 people. Patrick was at the top of that list, so that if anything ever happened to him, this is required by law, there would be a successor in place. He chose Patrick, and he chose him for a reason. He chose him because all of us thought Patrick was and could have been a future Speaker of the House of Representatives. He'll be remembered for how he conducted himself in those 22 days. You know, this is the first time in 234 years anybody's exercised a role like Patrick McHenry exercised. And so everything he did every day set a precedent for what would happen in a future crisis. Many of us thought, and this would include me, he probably had the power and authority to operate as a normal speaker. That is, he could have done anything a normal speaker would do. However, he consulted with historians, parliamentarians, distinguished legal thinkers, and frankly, with his own sense of the institution, and decided that would be the wrong thing to do. He had not been elected speaker by the body, so he should not operate as speaker. He interpreted the law to mean his only goal should be to keep the House operating and functioning and push it toward picking a new speaker. That's exactly what he did. There was no intrigue. He was fair, even-handed, and he pushed until finally the 22-day crisis of having no speaker was ended, and Mike Johnson assumed that role with the support of every single Republican and obviously with the support of the majority of the House of Representatives. That's an historic achievement in and of itself, and an historic restraint in the exercise of power. I think had Patrick started acting like speaker, he probably would have become speaker. He just didn't think that was the right thing to do, and he operated accordingly. So you hate it when the institution loses people the caliber of Kevin McCarthy and Patrick McHenry. But I will also tell you, there's a lot of young and talented and able people that are coming into the Congress, certainly have come in the last 2 sessions. There are more on the way. So I have no doubt the American people will continue to pick talented leaders on both sides of the aisle and send them here. But it certainly hurts when you lose a couple of great ones, and Kevin McCarthy and Patrick McHenry certainly qualify in my books to have that kind of accolade. With that, I look forward to visiting with you next week. It's going to be an eventful time. Theoretically, next week should be our last week in session for this year. But this is Washington, D.C., so I wouldn't be surprised if something happens to keep at least the Senate in session right up to Christmas as they wrestle with whether or not they can come to an agreement over a supplemental. And certainly there'll continue to be discussions about the appropriations process in the House, whether we're in session or not. So we'll try to give you a wrap up next week. With that, hope you have a good week in the days ahead, and good luck, God bless, and hope things go well for you and your family.